I want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Matt has kindly agreed to lead that.
Go ahead and find the flag at your local, at your closest to your vision, and 1, 2, 3, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I want to introduce the board members who are in attendance. I'm trying to find everyone's face on the screen at the same time. Dan Schisler, Meg Ludlam, Jennifer Hackett, Jason White, and I am Tasha Woods. All members of the board are present. We will start off with administration, the CTE language.
Thank you, Director Woods. The CTE language that we put on the agenda today is a result of a dialogue that we were having with EEA at the end of our bargaining season last fall. And we decided with the CTE language to wait on that and to have some more discussion. There was a CTE committee that met a few times this year to look at the language. EEA shared some language with us and we looked at it. What we're showing you is the language that we have given back to EEA. It's our recommendation now to EEA for that CTE language. I think there was a real desire. Career pathways is something that's really important in the board ends. And certainly our CTE programs are an integral part of promoting those career pathways in our district. And I think part of wanting to have that CTE language in the master agreement is to really just kind of crystallize what that process looks like every year when we make decisions around the CTE programming. And so the language, again, that you have in front of you is our current offer that we have, our feedback that we've given EEA concerning the CTE language. There have been no tentative agreements, so it's not a TA document at all. But in the spirit of transparency, we wanted to be able to share it with you and kind of share where we're at with it. And I've invited two people to help support this conversation, and that is Bo Snow and Shannon Panatoni. And they are here. We invited them to come to answer any questions that you might have. I think the best, possibly the best way to go over it would be just to review some of the major points in that document. The first part of the document basically is saying that the CTE staff, CTE director will meet with her groups and her teachers, look at her budget, and then with the approval of the EHS principal. And we also have CTE programs in our middle school. And so we would ask our middle school principal to weigh in, the CTE advisory committee, and then the cabinet team, all kind of going through that review process on how the CTE budget would work, especially as far as the supplemental contracts that we provide for CTE teachers for all of the extra work that they do. Certainly the CTE recommendations are driven by enrollment numbers, and which is what drives the availability of CTE funding. And Shannon has just done an exceptional job this year, really looking at that budget and making some good decisions around our CTE budget. You can see on number 2, it just kind of recommends, gives some guidance around, and I'll let Bo and Shannon answer any questions you might have around number 2. The number of days that are there, I asked for clarification from Bo, and our understanding is that those days that are there are similar to the hours that these teachers, the supplemental hours that these teachers work this year. And you can see it saying that those hours are not going towards some of the more typical expectations that we'd have of teachers in general. And then certainly at the bottom saying that if there's any need for any additional hours besides the ones that are agreed upon each year, and this would be an annual agreement, an annual process. So the hours of the supplemental contract would be looked at every year, and based on what was in the CTE budget, that would help, and the enrollment numbers that would drive that conversation around the number of CTE supplemental hours. But if teachers needed additional hours beyond those ones designated, that there would be a process, and that's what number 3 outlines, a process that we would go through to look at that. And so again, this is after, exchanging some language with EEA. This is just where we're at, and this is the language that we have offered back to EEA. And we're still engaged in the dialogue. Again, there have not been any TA'd or any tentative agreements, but in that spirit of transparency, we wanted to be able to share this with you and answer any questions you have. So with that, I'll open it up to both Bo and Shannon and just see if there's anything that you would want to add to my overall description. And Tasha, if you would like to formally recognize Bo and Shannon, we can turn their mics on.
Okay, yes, Bo, is there anything that you would like to add? His mic is not on. Oh, he's good. I think he gave thumbs up.
Yeah, I think that the important thing that after negotiations last fall, I think this year I learned a lot about the CTE, the process and the budgeting, and there were a lot of community members involved in that team. And I think that having that type of a process every year is going to be a positive, because I think we all had a really good sense of what the CTE budget was, what the capacity was for next year. And I think that having it written in a way where we do that on an annual basis, I think it supports the teachers, but it also supports administrators and the board, because we're able to recommend, a fiscally responsible option for teachers. And so I think from my perspective, being able to participate yearly in that process with the CTE director, with Shannon, and I echo what Ginger said, she's done a great job of working with the budget this year, and that whole process and team, because it was the first time we'd ever done CTE all by itself in negotiations. And so seeing the benefits that came out of it, I echo exactly what Ginger said, that I think when we come to an agreement with the union, I think it's a solid process that will allow us to stay within our budget every year.
Thank you. And Shannon, would you like to add anything?
I think both of them have hit the nail right on the head there, so I have nothing to add at this time, but happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Board, is there anyone who has a question? Maybe I should just go, Dan, I'll just go down the line. Oh, good. Meg does have a question.
Yeah, I thought you were deferring to Dan. There were a bunch of things in here I didn't understand, which other people may understand better than I did. Like, I'm sure CTE is different from other kinds of, from regular high school education, but I'm trying to look at the document. Basically,
would it help?
how has this been done in the past? I mean, the CTE always gets a supplemental agreement with certain days for certain things, and regular teachers don't get that unless they do something else like coach, is my understanding. But explain to me, you know, like somebody who doesn't know about education, especially about CTE education, what this is about.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. Under CTE, we have certain criteria that we have to meet per legislative reasons. And one of them is being able to gather and meet with advisory committee board members, which entails business and industry people. And so we are to work with them closely on developing our curriculum for each program, each course that we offer. And so that takes a little time there, as well as meeting with them. We meet with them between 3 and 4 times a year. And they're also our governing body, which also has to approve the courses that we teach. They also have to they approve conditional certifications for us that the OSPI asks for us to submit to the state when we're applying for Perkins and putting in for our course approvals through the state. And so the 4 days really focus around our work with our advisory board committees, as well as the frameworks that we have to develop with them, and then submit to OSPI for course approval. Because without those course approvals, we don't get the CTE funding, or the enhanced funding, I should say. The extended days are based on our career and technical student organizations, so FBLA, FFA, DECA, and all of those. And in the past, it has been paid just as you see it on this paper. Days may have fluctuated in the past a little bit, but for the time being that I have been in the district, those are pretty much the amount of days that have been issued to those advisors. And we are required by the legislature to have CTSOs or leadership equivalencies within our program, which means we are required to have extended leadership on the contracted school day. So we are required to do more outside of our contracted time.
And what's a CTSO?
A CTSO is a career excuse me. Now I got it backwards. A career technical student organization. So those are your FFA chapters, your DECA chapters, FBLA,
Yeah, okay.
TSA, and Skills USA as well.
Thank you.
Meg, did you have a follow-up question? Okay. Jason or Jennifer? Okay, Jason does have a question.
Sure, I have lots of questions. So I think my understanding was, so this has been kind of the consistent amount of days. Is that what I heard you say, Shannon? Is that these days have been pretty consistent over, I don't know how long you've been at the district, but like how many years are we talking about?
I've been here for at least 12 years. And so, yes, I know that FFA has been fairly consistent. In the past, I know FBLA has fluctuated in days, and DECA is relatively new. And so the 15 days would have been new last year. So this would be our second year in DECA. And TSA, I believe, we've had teachers go back and forth just depending on the courses that they're teaching, because TSA and Skills USA are similar, but they do have a little bit of difference. So depending on what the courses they're teaching, one of those student organizations might fit better with their classes. So they might be in Skills USA 1 year or TSA. It just kind of depends on what best fits with the curriculum that they're teaching. But those days have been pretty much what is on this paper that I am aware of.
So I was wondering if you can also kind of just verify. So typically, so like FFA, there's 40 days. That's a lot of days. So there must be a lot that happens.
There is quite a bit that happens, and if you look at the timesheets that are supplied, they're putting in almost 80 days in a year and over. And that's due to they are constantly in contact with their students, not only at school, but they are constantly in contact with them on their sites at home, checking on animals, part of fair, conventions and contests that are consistently going on, fundraisers, and several other events that they put on. They do host quite a few fundraising dinners that puts in a lot of time.
I'm sorry, I also have a really stupid question. So when this report was sent to me, of course, it's a bunch of acronyms that I don't know. I obviously know what FFA is. I come from a farmer's background, but so my question is DECA, I went to Ellensburg's site for CTE, and I see ag education, business education, family and consumer science, and technology and industries, but I don't see what DECA is. Can you give me a little bit more about what DECA is?
DECA is very similar to FBLA, which stands for Future Business Leaders of America. DECA really doesn't, it used to stand for Distributor Clubs of America way back, but it's just DECA now. But DECA is more focused on the marketing aspect, marketing and free enterprise, I guess you would say. And although FBLA and DECA cross events quite a bit, and FBLA does have marketing in there, they're both similar, but I think DECA does theirs in a different fashion than FBLA does, meaning how they not administer their events, but kind of what I'm looking at. DECA might do more of a presentation style, a debate style, where FBLA does that, but they also do the written test. So they perform a little bit differently in each event.
Sorry, full of questions. So these are part of supplemental contracts. And so it is my understanding, so for instance, like with COVID, where we are right now, teachers are still getting paid for supplemental contracts, even if they're not, there's nothing to do within the supplemental contract. So I'm wondering, as far as in these situations moving forward, I don't see anything listed in here with if there would be something that would prevent them from doing it. What I'm kind of trying to, I guess, make sense out of all of this is that these are just kind of like the days that they can claim. Like you said that FFA, like they were doing 80 days, right?
Oh, they do quite a bit.
Okay. So this is just a way to go ahead and make sure that they are getting paid for the days that they are working. I'm just wondering, does it ever work the other way where they're getting paid for days that they never use?
Well, currently right now, because of the situation that has gone, we have taken a look at the timesheets, and we have talked, each and every one of us, and a good majority of us have not met those hours and have asked our contracts to be stopped at the hours that we were able to complete. So we don't want to, we don't want to be paid for time that we're not working. We understand that. So the timesheet is to show what we have, and more or less everyone each year, not under these type of circumstances, but meet their days of the contract.
Okay. I think my last question for this, besides a question for Ginger, is so just for clarification, in this what we have been given, there is nothing that has been an increase that's proposed, correct? Okay, thank you. My last question is for Ginger. Ginger, what are the next steps with this document? And I heard the word negotiations. Is this something that could potentially go to negotiations? And if so, what will that look like?
Actually, we're in the process of negotiating this language. when I said it didn't go to negotiation, what I meant is that we haven't tentatively agreed on things. And so right now we're, you know, we got language, we looked at it, we said, okay, you know, we talked about it together, and then our team looked at it and said, well, if we add these pieces to it, now we're going to hand it back over to EEA, and now they have a chance to look at it, and they can make changes or whatever and send it back to us. So basically, the language goes back and forth until we look at it and say, yes, you know, we can tentatively agree on this language, and then they say, yes, we tentatively agree. And then the next step is EA would take the language to their membership, and we would formally take this to the board for your approval.
Thank you for that update on that process. I think being the new board member, I always sometimes am baffled by a process that sometimes I don't understand. And so what it sounds like is there's a tremendous amount of a lot of conversations that happen where the board really just kind of trust the administration and trust the staff to meet at a reasonable point. I think it would I would not be serving our community well if I didn't speak up to say, I know I was looking, Kittitas County just posted this last week an update on their economic and community impact report. And within that report, there is a rise of unemployment claims in Kittitas County for 2,400% up from last year. We know that we have community members that don't have jobs. We know that we are moving into a very negative recession that's coming our way. It's going to be very difficult for me to approve, as a board member, to approve any sort of agreement that would come across where anyone is getting any sort of additional pay or sort of additional incentives. I think we should recognize that our community is really needing to come together to come up with positive solutions. So I'm saying this publicly because I want you to hear it, as well as the others who are zoomed in to this meeting, that I hope that we would only be considering ways to move creatively forward, especially knowing that the school district is unique. Teachers, to my knowledge, all employees are still getting paid. They are all still working, and they are all still getting supplemental contracts, even when they may not be having to fulfill supplemental contracts. So with that being said, as kind of the new, probably a little outspoken board member, I just want to say, I really am challenging staff and admin to please consider this, consider our community, those that are paying the taxes that don't have jobs right now and that are looking really difficultly ahead at what the future lies, that the school really takes that into consideration moving forward. Thank you.
And Jason, just because you said that you were the new outspoken one, right? This special meeting, this process that we're going through now is what the board has chosen to move forward with transparency, right? This is the chance for us to hear what the district has proposed, and for us to, for the board to speak up, provide direction, provide parameters. That is why we are here, not just to mindlessly sit by and get a report. It is for exactly what you just did, to give direction and to give clarity to the district admin on that.
I'd like to jump in too, and I think that one thing that Jason, was talking about that I think is important, and I really appreciate Shannon saying, we're not putting in for hours that we're not working. I think that's the honorable thing to do and the right thing to do. But as we're looking at these supplemental contracts going forward, I mean, hopefully we won't be in this position again, but we've discovered things can happen. And I don't know if there's any way to integrate language into that says that if for any reason the hours are not worked, the payment will be based on hours actually worked. You know, in this case, of course, it's, you know, it's a crisis that shut everybody down, but I mean, clearly supplemental contracts should be based on what's actually done. So just, I don't know how that works in, but just a thought.
Can I add one thing, Tasha?
Yes.
I think it's worth noting too that, and I hear exactly what you're saying, Jason, that CTE, their budget works different than the general budget for the district. They generate their own funding, which is why we're in this situation. So their supplemental contracts are paid for by their enrollment, where every other program is in a different category. And so CTE generates the money to pay for these supplemental days within their budget. And my concern that I would put out there to the board is that if we pulled away the supplemental contracts from these folks, the loser in the end is the kids, because no one will do the 80 extra hours to do the fair animals, to do the other things. And so I think I wanted to make sure we're all clear that these hours are generated by the classes that they fill with kids because they do these programs. Like, you know, because Marcy does FBLA, Steve and Sammy do FFA. There's a reason they have the interest in their classes, which generates the revenue or the extra funding to support these things. And so what we're putting, or what we put on this, is an attempt to have a set budget based off of what the revenues or enrollment brought in, and then projecting that forward into the following year. And so it's not coming out of the general fund. It's not coming out of the general, it's its own budget that they generate on their own. And so it's different than other supplemental contracts that come from the district budget or the general fund. These are supplemental contracts that are generated by the extra funding for kids being in their classes. So I just wanted to make sure that distinction was out there as well.
That's a good clarification. And I don't think either Jason or I in any way is suggesting that people shouldn't be paid for the work that they do, just to make sure that it's, you know, that the contracts are written in a way that if something doesn't get done. I was in a board meeting a while ago, and they talked about, you know, being very careful, at WASDA conference, they were talking about being very careful about how you write things. And they gave the example of a contract that defines a certain number of hours, and some slight change and shift in the schedule, had real implications that were not intended. So just making sure that that's clear. And it is good to know that these supplemental contracts are not coming out of our levy funds, because obviously that's going to be something we're going to really have to watch going forward.
Sorry. I did see Jason and I did see Meg. Jason, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to thank Bo. That really helps when we're to know that actually those courses are actually generating that revenue. That changes the perspective greatly. So thank you for verifying that. I appreciate it.
Meg?
Yeah, I agree that that's good clarification, but in some ways it doesn't really change the point that Jason made about the fact that school district employees may be doing a whole lot better than a lot of other people in the county. And I think, so I just want to underline his point that we need to be sensitive to that.
Okay, thank you, Meg. Dan, you don't have your video on. Did you want to add something?
No, I'm fine. That makes a lot of sense. I did this because we've had in our house has had a history of kicking people off of meetings because of bandwidth. So I'm here listening, and I will contribute, but you may not see me. That's all. Anyway, it's very interesting. It's good to hear explanations for these, and I definitely agree that the funding is something that we have to be extremely concerned about. But as CTE does generate a lot of its own money, so that's a good thing to hear too, and it's a very valuable thing. I think the kids get a tremendous amount out of this program. So it's definitely something we want to maintain.
Thank you, Dan. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't raising your hand and I was missing it. Was there any other questions from the board? Was there any district administrators who wanted to add anything to the conversation?
I guess I would just add that I think that Shannon's done a good job this year, and it's just something to keep an awareness of, is that CTE, it does generate its own funding as a result of enrollment. And, you know, there's always that balance of what we pay for personnel, as well as the money for equipment and other aspects of the program comes out of the same budget, the same CTE budget. And so Shannon's done a good job of balancing the amount of the total CTE budget that goes towards personnel, as well as the amount that goes towards equipment. And that's another important reason, I think, to have a yearly process, so that we can always be looking at what are the needs of the program, what are the needs specifically around equipment, computer labs, etc. And then what is the need around all the extra hours that CTE folks put in. So I just wanted to add that clarification as well.
All right. I want to thank everyone who came here to have this conversation and answer those questions. This is, the board has stated that we are working towards transparency, and we are working on having these conversations more public. This is, I think, our very first meeting of us doing this outside of our normal board protocol, what we've historically done. The process of this is not up for a vote, the CTE contract. It's still in the middle of negotiation, but I do appreciate EEA, district administrators, board members being willing to do something new and to take our baby steps out there into transparency. Also with transparency, I am not asking any questions on this issue because I am recusing myself from this vote, because I do, when it does come up, I do have a sister who is a CTE instructor. So I will be recusing myself from this vote and this conversation. Did anyone else have anything that they wanted to add in regards to the CTE language? All right, let's go.
I do want to just say one more thing, because I know I was pretty outspoken there, but I just want to make sure that the teachers and staff that heard me speak up, that you know that I am such an advocate for the career and technology education, that is one area that I feel, not that there's not a lot, but I really feel very strongly about, that we need to support. And I had no idea about how it actually generates a lot of its own money. So I really, really do appreciate the hard work that's being done in those areas. And yes, we are at some really unique times with COVID and with what's going on with budgets. So just know that doesn't undermine or understate all the stuff that you are doing so much to help our students in the career and technological education. So thank you.
Oh, Jason, I think it's great that you had that conversation, and I think it's brave conversations and necessary conversations. So I think that was a good example of leadership, and that we should all feel comfortable to come here and have open conversations, because the base foundation of this is that every single person that has taken time out of their busy day to be here is for the kids and for teachers and for Ellensburg, right? That is the foundation of why every single person has logged into Zoom to have this fun, right? It's fun meeting. All right, policy 4260, the use of school facilities. This is the policy that was tabled during the study session. This is the same policy that was tabled in the study session that is now coming forward.
So I would like to, Tasha, if you could formally recognize, we have Jeff Whitney here and Kelly Krumbauer to review this policy with us.
Yes, Jeff, do you mind reviewing this with us?
Yeah. Oh, Kelly, you got it? Where are we?
I know it's very difficult. So I was trying to pick out one person to go first. Jeff or Kelly, who would like to go first to speak on Zoom?
Kelly can go and then I will go. How's that?
All right. There we go.
Okay. So this policy actually has changed a little bit from the previous policy, which looks like it was last, I think, approved in 14. I think it was just reviewed in 14. Is, you know, it's relatively the same. They've changed some of the wording in it. We have 3 different categories. They changed the titles of the categories. And I apologize because I don't have it open in front of me, which I need to get open here.
Kelly, do you want me to share my screen? Was it on?
Sure, that would be amazing.
Oh, Matt, you're going to have to do that, please.
So basically, they renamed the 3 different categories. The first one's basically any group. So there's 3 tiers. There's a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3. Tier 1 is any group that is associated directly with the school. So obviously for our students to be able to, oh, that's perfect. All right, and I can't read that, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. Matt, maybe you can enlarge it a little bit. It is pretty tiny.
So there basically are 3 groups, child-related groups or government agencies. That would be our tier 1. And what we're looking at there is that there basically is no cost involved with using our facilities if you are one of those groups in tier 1. In tier 2, then we have nonprofit groups. These would be groups that potentially could, well, they could be local agencies, any organization that basically is not for profit that could come in. And there is a fee for those groups in the tier 2. It's less than the 3rd group, which is the corporate, I believe, if you scroll down, or commercial enterprise is what they're calling it now. And that would be for-profit groups. So anybody coming in and actually charging or having a registration fee, they've got very specific rules around that. But basically, we'd be charging them full price. And, you know, I know that Jeff has done a lot of work because in our organization, we have a lot of different facilities. So we have a fairly similar process with when it comes to policy. So our policies kind of mesh with this. The old policy, we just replaced a lot of the wording in it, but it follows a fairly similar process to the new policy. And what they did from the old policy is they took out a bunch of procedural things, which we now have just moved into our procedures, which is what we're using. So Jeff has been using a 3-tiered process for all of the facilities, and there's then some complexity around the Morgan Auditorium. So Jeff, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we're in the, once this policy and the board has passed it, you know, then we've got to go and we're going to start reviewing all of our procedures. And I know that Brian and Kelly and I will meet to discuss, the Morgan will be one of the first topics. When we first opened Morgan, which is, I think we're about 1.5 years out now because I have to put in where we've been off here, we were kind of rushed into a system. We were kind of started with a 5-tier system. And that was Superintendent Mike Nolan, when he was here, he is the only one that actually approved us to use that. It was not approved by the board. And that was because we were not sure when this was going to open, and we opened during the middle of construction. So the 5-tier made sure that we had more people paying. And now what we're going to work to is try to shrink that into our 3-tier, where we currently are in community schools, so that they are mirroring each other so that there's not a lot of confusion. And I think that's the biggest thing. You talked about transparency. I think I work with the community on a daily basis. And I think that's really what we're trying to do here with all of our procedures, is make sure we read the policy and that our procedures match that. And I think that we're heading in that great direction, because Brian and Kelly do a great job with meeting. And I think I'm very lucky that I get 2 gentlemen, and Ginger as well, that, you know, are going to help us move community schools, you know, in a new direction, which I'm very excited for.
Yeah, Jeff, it just seems like it seems like everything fits into the same easy format except for Morgan Auditorium.
Yep. I say everything when I went back and reviewed this, the policy, like you said, it was just some word changes, but their user groups and the things that we're using on a daily basis are the same. Nothing has changed. And it's been, I think, pretty successful thus far with our user groups. And that's why I didn't see a lot of change here. But the Morgan Performing Arts Center gives us a little different angle because there's a lot more moving parts with a performing arts center. You know, if you open a gym, you turn on the lights, have a CS worker there just watching the gym. The Performing Arts Center, unfortunately, is you've got to have a manager in there at all times. That's for liability and security. And then, if you've got tech time, you've got your sound, you've got your lighting, and anything else that they're renting, from mics to stands to green rooms, it's a lot more wordage and a lot more things to put on a rental a policy, excuse me.
Thank you for that clarification, Jeff and Kelly. So to be clear, this policy has been reviewed by staff, and district staff is recommending the board pass this policy. That is recommendation coming from district. We're still going to do questions, Meg. I just want to make sure that is what I'm hearing from district administration.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Meg, yes, you're on mute, just so you know.
I just wanted to say that I appreciated the cleaned up language, or that the language is viewed as cleaned up, since it was this language and our language was previously modified in ways that I think we don't need to do. And so I'm glad everybody likes the WASDA version. I do see, Jeff, that you're calling it community schools still, which is what we used to call this policy. But WASDA has this other policy, which we'll get to in a minute, that it calls something like community, whatever it calls it.
Community relations.
Community education, yeah. So that term community schools is our term that relates to community use of our facilities. It's not to a community program. And so just wanted to clarify that.
That's correct. You are correct.
Meg, did you have any further questions?
No, in fact, when you're ready for a motion, I'll make it.
Okay, Jason?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I noticed that there is distinct language about the district does not discriminate based on ... I'm wondering what the need is for that in this policy. And before, I think I should have probably put a pretext to that, because you're all probably like, Jason, what do you mean? So let me go a little bit deeper. So I'm assuming, because it's in the policy, I think my main question is if it's going to be in policy that this is a non-discrimination, that this exists, and that this is going to be shared with whoever is planning to use a school facility that might be renting the space and so forth, and that's going to be handed out, that I'm assuming, how will this be followed up with procedure? Or I guess if it's there, again, because it's there, I'm assuming that means if a group that does discriminate based off of, let's say, race, or based off of some of the things that were listed there, let's just say it's sexual orientation or race or religion, and they do discriminate on that and they want to use our facilities, I kind of feel like that we are basically saying they will not be allowed to use the space because we have this in the policy. And I just wanted to verify if that's the case or not. So I don't know if that makes sense.
It did make sense. And also, I believe that was referring to the legal references. That WASDA puts out that we have to cite the legal references that are footnoted at the bottom of that policy. That's why those specific groups are mentioned. However, that does not answer your main question of, does that mean that we have the ability to choose who we let rent the facility?
No.
No, I mean, you see this all over all of our policies. whether it's HR or in our handbooks. We have a lot of, I mean, am I interpreting the question correct, Ginger? I say that we basically can't, we have no ability as a public entity, especially with an entity that takes federal funds, to make any form of discrimination as to who can rent the facility. So you see this all over our website and all over our legal documents. And so, yeah, we could never have limitations on who the district can't put that down and say someone can't do that based on a right or a particular status or race.
And again, I'm sorry, I'm new to this. It's still, it seems bizarre that we post that the district will not discriminate against that, but yet we will allow anyone to use the space that may absolutely discriminate against this. And I get it, if that's state law, that's state law. That's my only concern about why we have to have it in there if we're not gonna, if it means nothing to who's renting the space.
I think part of it is that, you know, we have to make a judgment on somebody as to whether they are discriminating or not. And that's a difficult thing to do. And that can get into some fights about various things. And I don't know that that is our place to do, even though it may be obvious to us that somebody is discriminating. I don't know that we have the legal position to be able to say something like that.
Well, and I think there's two pieces to this. The first paragraph says we don't discriminate. The second paragraph is much narrower. It only relates to the basis of sex. And it says that we can't provide the facilities to people who discriminate. So if I was to interpret that second paragraph right, an organization that did not allow women to participate, technically, could we even let them use the facilities? So it's community athletics programs will not discriminate on the basis of sex. And then the other question there, of course, is sex and sexual orientation considered the same or different. But I mean, the first part I don't think is directly implicable, but you know, it doesn't require us to take action. But the second part seems to me could potentially, we'd need to make sure it's very clear in policy what that means, because that would require us to turn down somebody that didn't meet that standard, specifically in the relation to athletic programs and sex discrimination.
I think that was pretty much, I appreciate the responses. I think what I can do, I don't want that to stop the policy. I think overall, I agree with what was said earlier. I really feel strongly that this is a much better policy for us to adopt to move forward. I think I can educate myself by reaching out to other school boards and potentially school districts that have had hate groups or other groups that have used their facilities to kind of find out how they have moved forward. I think we as a district, if we're focused in equity, we need to be entrenched in this, and we need to be aware of these situations that can happen here. And I think it's better that we be ready for it to then be like, oh, it's happening, and what do we do? So I will commit myself to kind of investigate that in the Washington state to see what else I can learn. And for now, I would support this policy.
Sorry, I'm having internet issues. Let's see, everyone is frozen on my screen.
It doesn't look like anybody is shaking their heads or anything on our screen. So can I make a motion that we approve this policy?
I will second that and appreciate Jace's point.
Are you still with us, Tasha?
Yeah.
It appears she's logged out and is logging back in, so let's give it just a moment.
Thanks, Matt.
Let's see, is that any better? Oh, good. Okay, I'm gonna try to leave my video off and see if that works, but everyone is frozen on my screen.
Hello, Tasha. I think I can hear you. So I will just let you know that there was a vote to approve, or a motion to approve this policy, and there was a second. And that's when we lost you.
Okay, sorry, so there was a vote for approve, so do we just need my vote?
Well, there was not a vote to approve. There was a motion to approve.
Yeah. So if there's any room for discussion, and then I think we call for a vote.
All right, is there anyone who would like to further discuss this? All right, then with a roll call vote, let's vote. Meg?
Aye.
Okay, Meg says aye. Jason, I see your thumbs up. Aye. I don't have any audio, you guys. Jennifer?
Aye.
Okay, and I see Dan with an aye.
Yes, aye.
I also vote. Okay, and I'm trying to push every single button over here, attempting to do something on my internet to make this work.
Can I just get clarification
So
on?
this is approved and goes forward.
Can I get clarification on who made the motion and who seconded?
I believe I made the motion.
And I seconded.
Thank you.
And because of my internet connections, is it possible for Meg to take over running this meeting because this is a very unstable internet network?
I can do that.
That'll be good. And I'll try to get mine stable over here, but it is just it's not working very well.
Okay. Okay, well, I believe we've just finished policy 4260 and 4265, which is the next item on the agenda. My understanding was that we intended to remove that from the agenda because it's a policy that WASDA has concerning a program that we do not have, and that in fact it may not even be necessary to bring to the board to consider policies that are irrelevant to us. There are some others in this category you'll eventually encounter as well, but that's my understanding is we don't really need to act on this because we don't have this policy. We don't need this policy.
We wanted to check in with board members. Matt and Meg and I meet and we go through the policies, and wanted to make that suggestion to you guys that if we go through, you know, WASDA comes out with all kinds of policies. There's another policy around like driver education, which we don't have. And so when we see ones, and this one was about a type of parent program that we don't have, we propose that that you guys are okay with, that board members are okay with us making those decisions like this policy that we don't need to bring it forward. So we just wanted to put that out there to the rest of the board members too to see, and this is an example of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it makes no sense to load our policies down with policies we're not doing. If we want to implement a program, then we should go back and find the policy and make sure it represents what we want to do.
Okay.
That makes sense to me too. I don't see the reason for having things in there that we aren't applying.
Anybody else, or can we move on?
You still have it on the agenda as a motion, and since it sits there as an action item, even though the recommendation that currently sits is to not adopt, and I would proceed with doing that.
I didn't hear the last bit of that, but I would propose, I would, what is it, welcome or look for a motion to not adopt this policy.
So I move that we table this policy and do not adopt it at this time.
I'll second it.
I'm not sure we need to table it if we're just not going to adopt.
Yeah, it's not really tabling it. It's really saying that we not adopt this policy.
So it just be, we are pulling this policy?
Well, we don't have it now, and we don't need to add it.
So then I move that we do not adopt this policy at this time, as it does not represent a service we're providing.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we not adopt this policy as we don't have the associated program. I need to call for a roll call, I guess, which is, I'll start with Tasha, if she can. Okay, good. Dan?
Aye.
Oh, Jason, thank you. Jennifer, thank you. Dan, we got it. And I also vote aye. So we are now at the interlocal agreement for provision of services and reimbursement with the city. I assume it is Brian or someone from the staff who's going to tell us a little more about this.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. I'd be happy to speak to this interlocal agreement. I'm very excited about this. This initial draft was penned by the attorney for the city of Ellensburg, so I want to thank Terry for doing that. This was reviewed and altered just slightly by our attorney, Andrew Green, who added language specific to the Interlocal Act for governments to be able to work together. And the overarching idea for this is to allow the city of Ellensburg and the school district to work together on joint projects where it makes sense for us to look for cost efficiency savings, and in our work together on these school projects, we have already identified two minor areas that we can work together, and one of them, for example, is helping the city connect their well that is on our Weiniger property to their new water lines. We can work with them so that saves them the time and energy to have to go through a wetland mitigation, because we can include that within our scope, and it doesn't cost us any extra time or energy per se, and so that's a help to them. They are working with us on our Cora Street improvements as well. We are hopeful that we're going to have the permits to begin that work starting tomorrow morning, and there's an opportunity for us to work together to help them with sewer improvements, and for them to help us with maybe some of our electrical work that we have to do, and that they've already purchased some or made some purchases on existing bids that would help us out and be a cost savings for us. So it's all meant to show our public, we're working together well, and we're looking for cost savings where we can find them, and so that's what the spirit of this interlocal agreement is. So I would urge you, board, to approve that, and then we'll keep you posted on some of the projects as they happen. Any questions at all on the project?
Sounds like a good way to work. So if there's no further discussion.
Meg, can I just ask a quick question? So
Yeah,
can
sure.
So Brian, would you just confirm how this resolution started or moved forward? Was this initiated by a joint effort between the two parties, or was this initiated by the city or by us? What kind of brought this forward?
Oh, a very joint discussion that we've had on, we've had ongoing discussions about our two new schools, and one conversation just kind of led to the next, and then it became very clear that we had projects in the same vicinity that we could would be a public benefit if we work together and save costs that way, and so that's how that happened. So anyway, I'm appreciative of the city wanting to do that and to be open to that. And our attorney, Andrew Green, was very complimentary, saying that he doesn't see a lot of these. And so he was happy to see us, working together in this way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for this question and for that question, because that's the kind of thing I always want to know too. And again, I think it sounds like the right way to work together. So is there any further discussion? I guess I am looking, this is an action item.
So I move that we approve the interlocal agreement between the school district and the city of Ellensburg.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the interlocal agreement between the district and the city of Ellensburg. Is there any further discussion? I will call for a vote. Jennifer, I see Jennifer's. I see Jason. Who else am I looking for? Dan. I see Dan and Tasha. Did we get Tasha last time, or have we lost her altogether?
I don't know. I'm not seeing her.
I'm not sure. Anyway, and I also vote aye, so the motion carries.
Thank you, board.
Thank you. So, public comment. There's a whole speech I'm supposed to give at this point about public comment, but I believe at this time in the middle of the COVID crisis, we're taking public comment by email, and I'm not aware that we have any comments.
I actually put the email address in the chat box for everyone to see, that if those who are interested in submitting public comment, that the email goes directly to the board, and the email address is listed there, board@esd401.org.
Thank you, Matt. So we are now at the meeting closing, which begins, this has been substituted for board calendar because when we were doing the agenda, we didn't know how to add it. But basically, we have talked before about the endless policy review that we're undergoing, and we really need to wrap this thing up because we're chasing our tail. I mean, we're getting farther and farther behind because policy changes come up faster than we're approving them. And I had proposed, Jason and I together had proposed previously a process to try to finish this up in some special meetings with a bunch of policies at once, that we were meeting would be only about policy in order to get this finished. And there were some specifications about how the comments would be received and how we wouldn't have any editorial comments unless it was our own language. And in the proposal that we made at that time, we had suggested categorizing the policies according to whether they needed staff review or whether they had changed since we adopted them or whether they something else. But we seem to be going by series, and that seems to be working fine. We have just finished the 4,000 series today, I believe, with our action. And we have a number of policies, quite a number of policies in the 5,000 series that we still need to address, and even more in the 6,000 series. And then we have some loose ends in the 2,000 and 3,000 series. We finished the 1s and we finished the 4s now. So I would see that as 3 meetings, possibly only 2. But I would like to propose again that we set up the first of these fun meetings that we're going to have to knock this off. Is there any
I think that would be a good thing.
after discussion?
That would be a good thing to
Hi, Tasha.
get a handle on and finish up. I mean, we've been doing it for a year and a half now, so.
Yeah, I agree, Meg. I think you all have been diligent, and we need to just keep moving forward to get these policies moved. So we have a lot of business in the future, and these policies are critical to have in place.
So would we want to look at maybe like 4:30 next Wednesday? Kind of keep it on a Wednesday, or you guys let me know when would you want to plan a special meeting? We could do one next week. It'd still be virtual, and beyond that, you know, we may be meeting in person again.
I have no constraints. I do want to say, though, as another comment on this, that the idea that we will finally have a policy manual we can go to and not be certain, and be certain whether that is indeed our policy, is something we really need to get to. So I appreciate that, and that people are willing, at least I think people are willing to do this. And next Wednesday at 4:30 works for me. What about others?
That works for me as well.
So it works for me, and I'm actually texting Tasha. She is getting kicked in and out, so she says she'll make that work.
Okay, and Dan, is it okay with you?
I think I might have something going at 6 or 6:30, but I can be late to that, I believe. So 4:30 would work. Yeah,
Would 4 be better if others make it at 4? Although I like having a hard stop when Dan has to leave.
Would 4 o'clock be better, or would that work for people?
So 4 would work for me. I'm waiting for a response from Tasha.
I can typically do 4. It's just I usually have something right up to it. And if we're doing it online, then I should be able to do it just fine because I'm moving from one Zoom meeting to the next. So,
Point of clarification, the governor's stay on our ability to have online meetings ends on the 4th.
Oh.
So we can't.
And that's of course, unless we get further extension on that. But as of today, the most current information I have is that ends on the 4th.
Well, I think they're either going, so the 4th is when his current order expires. They're either
Right.
going to have to open things up on the 4th, or they're going to have to extend the meeting. So I think we could probably plan for a meeting on Wednesday and figure, you know, preferably maybe at 4:15 or 4:30 so that it could work if Jason has to make them physically. And then we could, we could adjust the location depending on what the governor's decision, but the decision will have to come out, I mean, by the 4th.
Yeah.
We'll know more than 24 hours ahead of time.
Would that, the way it sits, would that mean we can't do these kinds of meetings after that if it goes away?
We can no longer do online meetings or meetings via Zoom
I see.
after the 4th.
Or if I'm correct, I mean, we should not be able to do meetings that are exclusively via Zoom. So we should still, I mean, we've always in our policies been able to have some people Zoom in or come in virtually, but we would have to have a physical presence in a physical location.
Correct.
But then again, they would have to allow us to do that before they could, I mean, I think they're going to either have to allow us to do physical meetings or they're going to have to extend this Zoom authorization.
So why don't we just say 4:30 next Wednesday? It's by Zoom. If they say we can't meet in person anymore, if they lift that, then we can do it in person. And if somebody needs to Zoom in because they can't meet in person, then we can accommodate that. And I just want to make sure, Kim, many of those policies, we're probably looking at some of those 5,000 policies.
Mm-hmm.
Do a thumbs up, or are you able to do that next Wednesday? Okay.
Okay. Ginger and Matt and I do not have another meeting between now and that date. Do we want to have one? Possibly including Kim, as if the focus is on, since the focus will be on the 5,000 series.
We could look at that. Let me talk to Kim and we'll get back with you, Meg.
Okay. Okay.
Can I also suggest, I like the way we did the last set of policies, but if we could get them with enough time to review and get back with comments, I think that the meetings go much more quickly if people who have issues with the policies have documented them, and then we can all review rather than having a, not
Yeah.
to have the discussion in person, but it's much more.
Yeah, I agree, but
If I know the list of this policy, these are the questions, and then we can go through those.
yeah, I think we have enough time to do that. I was at first thinking we didn't, but yeah.
Something along with this lines with the agenda setting is I did get feedback from 2 community members that the policies that we were discussing last time, we weren't really, in the study session they came up and I had heard that they couldn't see the policies in the study session because they were posted in the regular session. So we are going to be, so because we will be reviewing the agenda during the study session for the regular session where we will actually vote on the policy, I don't know how that would, what's the best way to communicate and be transparent with the community to let them know that these policies are posted so that way people can view them. I don't know if Matt, if it's just too much work to post it in both the study session and the regular session, or if there's directions on how to do that.
I believe this would be a special meeting rather than a study session and a regular meeting. This would be a special meeting on policies only, so that would get around that issue.
Okay, thank you.
They would be posted in the agenda for the special meeting. Thank you. And we will get to work.
One of the things that I asked Tasha about after the last meeting was when we introduce a policy, instead of just saying we're gonna vote on policy 2507 or whatever, and then vote on it. If she or someone could just briefly say what the policy's about in the meeting so that people will know what it is we're voting on. I think that'll help a little bit with the transparency.
Yeah, I think I've been writing these, what I call policy blurbs, to explain why we're even looking at this policy. It might be prudent to actually read them or expand upon them. That's a good suggestion.
And I think too, we'll be really explicit about the fact that administrators reviewed it, that we reviewed it, and who reviewed it. And, after we read the description, we can certainly defer to the staff that looked at it like we did tonight and just say, give us an overview so that people know that they've been looked at and that we're good to go with putting it on the agenda.
Yeah, good suggestions all. And Matt, Ginger, Kim, and I will get to work on this and try to make it go painlessly, relatively painlessly. So let's see.
Being the operative.
Yeah. So we are at clarification and next steps. Do you have any, Ginger?
No, I'm doing good.
Okay, and do we have an executive session?
I had a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I noticed that the guys are starting to work out there on north of the John Wayne Trail, and I wondered if we talked about having a drone that was could fly over there and take pictures of that whole process as it was developing. And I wondered if we have that and if we could maybe start taking pictures once a week or something.
Hey, Dan, this is Brian. That's a great question. Garco actually, they have a gentleman who is a licensed drone pilot. He's already been
Oh,
taking pictures. They've done both the baseline Mount Stewart site and the new school site. And Angela's been doing a marvelous job working and updating our website. And you're going to start seeing regular pictures and drone pictures on our website here. And yes, we do have heavy equipment in a big way up on the new site. We are doing prep work, waiting for our final permit to be issued. But yeah, things are moving in a big way already, and so you'll get to see. It may not look like the National Geographic time-lapse footage that you see on programs, but hopefully it'll be pretty close.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I rode by there on my bike the other day and saw lots more going on the new site than the Mount Stewart site, but I guess that's where we are at the moment. Or it looks a lot more active on the new site. Okay, so no executive session. Brian, Matt, I don't think we don't have any documents to sign. Correct?
That's correct. No documents this time.
Okay, I would attend a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Entertain a motion.
I knew there was a word.
Yeah.
Okay, so did I have?
Oh, Jennifer,
I moved. Is somebody seconded?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. We are adjourned.
Okay. Aye. Okay, good.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Later.
Good night.